welcome to another video. I am Simply G, and today I'm going to be showing off everything that I got for this month of July. We are halfway through the year, and I don't have really enough to split these into two separate videos. I mean, the manga and light novels on their own could be their own video, but I only have one anime, so I don't think it's worth, breaking them up. So I think going forward this will be the format. And for those who don't know, who missed my previous video, I'm currently going into this really large transition of unhauling and getting rid of series that I will no longer read or just don't want necessarily physically. That goes for manga, anime, light novels, even a lot of my figures and art books. It's really a big cleanse of the collection. There's still plenty here, don't worry, but it's been quite a lot of work over the last couple weeks, and it's still an absolute mess in here because I'm still having things, finding new homes, selling things, donating things. Additionally, because this is this period of transition for me and the collection, I did want to make kind of clear that I do have a lot of pre-ordered items, not necessarily from online stores. I have no issue with canceling pre-orders from, Amazon or Book Depository, big stores, but I do have kind of standing existing pre-orders with some smaller local comic shops, and I don't really want to cancel them, but I have, finished or stopped my ongoing pre-orders with them for certain series. So I kind of just don't want to leave my local stores high and dry when I've made orders months ago, that they're kind of relying on me being able to pay for when they are released. So over the coming months you may see items or books. I might not necessarily show them off, but I do want to mention them in these videos just to be as clear and transparent as I can be with this process, because I don't think it's right, morally right, for me to have made those orders so long ago and with the expectation of purchasing them, and then once they really come into store or have been received, once these final order cutoffs have happened, I don't want to just go to those stores and say, oh, sorry, I don't want them anymore. It's very, very, I think it's just a shitty thing to do. So there will be some times in the coming months where I might have a volume or two of a series that I am no longer collecting physically, but I have a pretty reliable system where those can find new homes very quickly. A couple of them my sister is following now, so I'll just pass those on to her. Or, well, I say she's following now. She has taken my copies of. So, yeah, it's gonna be this whole thing. But rather than spend too long in this intro, I just wanted to lay some groundwork as to why there might be things in here that I talk about and that I have purchased but are I actually can't show off because I've since sold them, or they have found a new home with a friend or my sister or a family member. So, yes, let's just get straight to it, and I hope you guys enjoy. Up is the anime, only one from this month, and one that I had pre-ordered a long time ago, one that I really enjoy, and one that I am really looking forward to rewatching. I've kind of fallen in love with this sort of show that is an homage for a larger genre and remakes, things like that. So this is from Crunchyroll, aka Funimation, aka whatever else, smaller anime companies they've since eaten. This is SSSS Dynazenon, the sequel, or kind of, it's set in the same universe kind of SSSS Gridman, and is a modern reboot, adaptation kind of the Dynazenon series, which I presume is a tokusatsu type of show. I don't know. I'm not good at tokusatsu or like a lot of Japanese live action pop culture stuff. I've never, like, I didn't, Power Rangers was very popular when I was younger, but I never watched it. I'm just not really into toku. But I do really enjoy things that are love letters to this sort of stuff, and a modern reimagining of a really beloved genre and beloved characters. It sort of fits in a similar vein to things like Gatchaman Crowds, which I also really enjoy, and Samurai Flamenco, which is great, and Tiger and Bunny as well, which is a little less homage but a little more, well, I mean, I guess it's an homage to kind of American hero comics sort of stuff, and the superhero genre prior to when My Hero Academia and subsequent, like, the Marvel Universe had made it just explode. I mean, it doesn't predate the Marvel Universe, cinematic universe, but I'm just rambling. I'm rambling, but I did really enjoy the show. I watched it when it was airing, or well, just I watched it all at once a couple weeks after it had finished airing. I really enjoyed Gridman, so I knew that I would probably like this one. I like this one even more. I love the cast. They're really engaging and likable and relatable, and I just I'm really looking forward to the next entry, which is a film. And I think these two, the crossover, I don't know, but I know there's an upcoming film within this universe, which has both the Gridman and Dynazenon titles in it, so maybe it's crossover, I don't know. But yeah, it's very fun. It's one of those, like, combining robots types of series, and it was very, very fun. As I said, I'm definitely not like a nostalgic fan or an expert. I really know nothing about a lot of these classic Japanese kids shows and like pop culture that are beloved from prior generations, but I think it's a testament that, having not had any of that background, this was still really enjoyable, very engaging. I believe this is Studio Trigger work, as was Gridman. It looks great. The characters feel very, I don't want to say authentic. They feel very natural. They feel like actual young people, teens. They make decisions, and some very hard decisions, and the aspect of growing up and, you know, facing your past and your situation and all of these things was also really present in Gridman, but I think it was just kind of perfected through a lot of the character stories in this one as well. Like, I just thought it was really good, and I'm looking forward to the follow-up. So before I jump into like a lot of the other books that I got for this month, I just wanted to mention some of the titles that I purchased this month and read and then sold on, or again have found a new home for. Two that I can't show because they're no longer here is Volume 5 of A Sign of Affection. Really sweet, lovely story about a deaf young woman and her ongoing relationship with this guy who she meets on a train one day. Really, really good. I love that series. It's very sweet. It really frames the relationship and the importance of communication and clarification in communication with the couple. I think Sumorishita has done a really great job at making a pretty likable pair of young people. They're college students. Their relationship flow really naturally. The reason I'm no longer going to be buying that physically is when I already follow the simul published chapters on the various platforms that it's published across. For me, it's typically Crunchyroll, but I think it's also on Azuki and a couple other of them. And I'm up to date on that, so whenever I buy a new volume, I don't reread it. It's just there sitting on the shelf. And typically for me, a lot of the romance that I read, I don't necessarily revisit a lot. So I decided that I'm just gonna stick to it digitally. Like, it's not I'm up to date and I do enjoy it, and I really think it's very, very good and highly recommend it, but I don't see myself rereading it in the future and when it's done necessarily. Additionally, sort of in a similar vein, and I didn't mean this to happen, but I also got the 12th and final volume of Perfect World, which is a romance about a young woman and her boyfriend, who is has a spinal injury and so is in a wheelchair. He's paraplegic, and that was one that I had started digitally. When it made the jump to physical, I picked up where I the whole series and kind of continued on with it. And then one that I really, really love. I think it's a beautiful depiction of kind of the ups and downs and the realities of living with disability and living with someone with disability as well. I think it gives a pretty fair depiction of, like, both the difficulties and the struggles of having a physical disability and living with someone with a physical disability, but also the triumphs. And, like, it's not it, and this shouldn't be have to be said, but, like, obviously it's not all downsides, and disabled people are just as valid and are just as able to fall in love and, you know, thrive and have a wonderful relationship with both able-bodied people or other disabled people. Like, that's not that shouldn't be an issue, or shouldn't be kind of seen as something to be judged. And that's a point that especially the last volume I think really highlights, is that, you know, disabled people are people, right? Like, and that's been the whole series, but I think the way that a certain other side characters and things have been working, it's just a really nuanced look at disability, and it's something that I think that the manga always treats very kindly and with a lot of nuance, or at least a lot of intention. I also loved the whole story arc of our main characters and their struggle with adoption and in vitro fertilization, and they're finally them growing their small little family, and then the struggles after the fact, you know, being raising a baby with people, you know, with one working parent, one parent who has, you know, very unique needs and can't necessarily do everything that a able-bodied person would be able to do, and also that support structure of family and friends. And I think it's just really good. And one of the big things, even the reason I say that the series is very well done with its intentionality, obviously the depiction of disability is first and foremost and is done with great nuance, but I think something that became really clear in the later volumes of that series is how well the series depicts I don't want to say modern families, but like non-traditional families, families who do have, adoptive children, or, step parents, or and half siblings, those kinds of things. Like once once our couple got together, it wasn't just happily ever after. And when you saw how these characters worked through their struggle with starting a family, and how that played into their own personal experiences even prior to disability, I thought that was very, very well done. And I think that the culmination of the whole series made it very satisfying by the end. It's beautiful. I highly recommend the series, especially if you're looking for a romance with good, a good representation of physical disability, most specifically. It's worth reading, and I think you should check it out. It's also just like super sweet and saccharine and lovely. And I did like it wasn't intentional that both of my disability romance manga are the ones that I can't show you. But that's not to say that I didn't love them or don't love them. I just probably will not reread them, and if I do, I have digital options to read both of them. It's not a big issue for me. There's two more that I do actually have the books here, and can show off. Two more that I got, that this one my sister, well, both of them my sister will be taking. The first is I Think Our Son is Gay, Volume 3 by Okura. This is a sweet slice of life, kind of comedy about a supportive mother who has her suspicions that her oldest son is gay. He's not very good at hiding his affection and attraction to not only his best friend, but also like just kind of certain guys in general. And her kind of not struggles, that's not the right word. Her kind of journey of acceptance and becoming a good ally and advocating for her son and trying to understand, the LGBT community and meet more queer people and really face her prejudices or inherent biases that she never necessarily examined before this. It's really sweet, really lovely. Both the mother and the younger brother in this are great and are really wonderful allies to this teenage boy who isn't quite at the level of being open about himself to his family or his friends and is still very much closeted, but them slowly making him feel assured that he will be loved and accepted by them regardless. His father, on the other hand, is he's got a ways to go. He's still very much within that societal prejudice and bias towards gay people, and is quite homophobic. Not necessarily in a hateful way, but in that kind of, it is hateful, but not in like, oh, I wouldn't necessarily think he'd, disown his son if he came out to him, but I think he just has never had any kind of exposure or experience with gay people, and so has just always internalized that societal homophobia. I don't think his dad is a bad person necessarily, but he's also not to the point where he's a good ally or necessarily would react well to his son coming out. And one of the really good things I think about this particular manga is the mother, his wife, very easily and very assertively challenging him on his own, again, prejudices in a way that she has been able to do privately and personally with herself, because she has kind of this larger realization about her son. But her husband doesn't really spend enough time with the family to have any kind of suspicions. Although, like, he's pretty dense. So, I mean, and it's not a excuse, but I don't think it's malicious either. And I think the way that Okura writes the family dynamic is probably quite true to, well, I think there's a hopefulness to that. And in the previous volume, Okura actually mentioned that he himself came out to his mother for the first time, or finally came out to his mother, and her own kind of journey and of acceptance, maybe. And so I think that a lot of, again, the societal prejudices comes from just what is inherent to a lot of Japanese culture of homophobia. But I think the way that this is portrayed is that there are a lot of really wonderful, good people who care about others and who care about their loved ones who might not be, who might be homosexual, who might not be heterosexual, enough to then educate themselves and better themselves to give those people the support that they deserve. And we are all humans, we're all learning and growing, and I think that's the biggest aspect of I Think Our Son is Gay. That really works very well, and it's just really sweet to see, especially this mother coming to, like, realizing and recognizing, her son isn't inherently what she had assumed and doesn't inherently fit the heteronormative idea of, like, perfect or ideal or whatever, but that doesn't make her love him any less. It doesn't change who he is, and it doesn't mean that, he's a bad person or there just needs to be something that to be fixed. It's real. I think it's very well done. It's really super sweet. I really like this series as well, again, but this is one that it's a very short, like, they're very thin little books. They're quite expensive for what they are. It's one that's also, like, mostly kind of short and to the point. It's very webcomic type of, or Twitter comic type of publishing, and because of that, I think it's one that I can stick to digitally without missing out. But it's very good, and I do recommend you try it out in whatever capacity you can. And finally, for these books that I got this month that I enjoyed but have found new homes for, and this is maybe a surprise, but this is Go For It Again Nakamura by Sunde. This is one, again, that my sister will be taking. This is the follow-up to Go For It Nakamura, a very sweet kind of slice of life comedy about a closeted gay teen who has a big fat crush on one of his classmates, and slowly over the course of that book becomes his friend. This is a lot, like, pretty much more of the same. I would say that I was maybe a little bit disappointed with this book compared to the last. Not because it was bad or anything, but I think it focused a lot more on the comedy aspects, a lot of, like, comedic jealousy type of stuff and misunderstandings, which I always find kind of exhausting in romance anyway, rather than any real character growth, which I think I wanted, considering the hints at the end, like, over the course of the first book. And that's not to say that there's none. It's interesting to see, it will be interesting to see how the friendship between Nakamura and this other boy goes, especially considering, his friend, this other boy that he has this crush on, is having kind of his own confusing feelings about relationships and love and attraction. But it just didn't, it it wasn't necessarily what I wanted as a follow-up, which is fair, for it not to be. Like, it didn't have to be that, but I do think there was not enough of the character moments, in order to, like, yeah, have more of the comedic elements. And so I'm more than happy to, if there is a follow-up volume to this, I will continue to read it, and I do like Hyundai. I like their stories. I love their artwork. But it's probably one that I would pick up a digital volume for rather than, buying a physical print copy, because I probably won't reread it. I also kind of noticed that I hadn't reread the original Go For It Nakamura. So that one has already found a new home. This one is going to my sister. So again, not a bad series. Actually, one that I do really, the first volume especially, I really enjoyed. This one is a fun follow-up. It wasn't necessarily what I wanted, but I don't think it's bad, and I do think that it's in line with what this series has been. But for me, this one is not gonna stick around. The stuff that I am holding on to, the first is a complete volume, all in one, a fantastic new release from Drawn and Quarterly. This is Talk to My Back by Yamada Murasaki, a collection of stories from the perspective of a housewife and mother of two who really just feels very trapped in her role as mother and housewife. Her relationship with her husband doesn't seem that wonderful, and so it's kind of the ongoing challenges for this woman to kind of come to terms or find her place, try to search for freedom in a life that she finds quite stifling. And considering Yamada Murasaki's personal background, she herself was divorced and had left her kids. It's quite clear, I think, in what the tone and the message of the series is. I thought it was really wonderful. I don't think it was ever hateful. So how do I say that? Like, I don't think that Yamada necessarily portrays this woman as hating her. I mean, there's certainly times where she really hates her husband, but I don't think she hates her kids. I don't think she hates the fact that, she got married necessarily, but she hates the role that she now has to play for the rest of her life as a woman, and also just the horrible double standards placed on women after marriage compared to their husbands. Her husband is not good. I don't like him, and you're not supposed to like him. I don't think he's not like horrifically abusive, but he's also, this is not a marriage of love. I feel it's a lot more convenient for both of them to stick around, and I think that's definitely one of the larger aspects of how this woman sees her situation. And there's, over the course of the book, there's various times where she really is looking for an escape or some freedom, which ultimately comes in really small things like getting a part-time job, or even just the quiet that she has after the kids have gone to bed and before her husband gets home, where she doesn't have any responsibilities to anyone. It's completely her time. And I think that's, I don't want to say this is a negative or depressing look. I don't want to say it's cynical or pessimistic because I don't think it is. I think it's a very nuanced take of marriage, especially when it did come to this era of, you know, sticking to convention and staying together for the kids and the all of these things that come up. But it also recognizes the good times that can happen in a relationship like that. You know, not every day is going to be horrible. Sometimes your husband is going to be like nice to you, or does do the surprisingly minimal amount of work that does help around the house. Housework is what I mean. Sometimes you do have really wonderful moments with your kids and you're proud of them or you're happy to help them, but also not like that's not all the time every day, and especially when you are really the only, like, your only life, your whole life is confined within a home, is confined within other people relying on you and you making their schedules, their lives move as efficiently as possible, which is very often left to a mother. And that, again, that's not to say like every mother resents you know, their children and their husband, or every marriage is like this, but I do think that what Murasaki was able to capture in this book, I think definitely would feel very, very relevant and relatable to a lot of people, especially of her era. And even now, right? But especially of her era. This is a Garo comic. I don't think I mentioned that. But I think it's a wonderfully well done look at a woman and her life and the very messy and difficult and complicated and, you know, upset and angry aspects of that, fueled by the societal expectations placed on her, fueled by the hypocrisy of the patriarchy, fueled by, you know, this idea that every woman should just become the little mother after marriage and have no expectations for themselves. It's really, really good. I really enjoyed this. It's very different to the other Drawn and Quarterly kind of female Garo collection that they put out previously, which is The Sky is Blue with a Single Cloud. But I think both of them pair very well together. Both are very, very well suited to Drawn and Quarterly's catalog or library of books, and I highly recommend it. I really did enjoy this, and I think it portrays a lot of very subtle things without, and because there's a lot of very overt things in here, but I think the way that it can bounce between those very overt moments and very subtle, nuanced touches of daily life is really, really good and worth reading. Next is volume 11 of the deluxe edition of Berserk by Kentaro Miura. This is the volumes 31 to 33 in the original singles. Again, I really don't need to say much about Berserk. What hasn't been said about this series, it's hugely influential, although I will say this, and I say this every time, but this is my first reading of the series in its entirety. I had read the first couple volumes many years ago, didn't really like what I had attempted to read. I also really disliked the culture or the discussion surrounding Berserk, i.e., a lot of the fans. Something this large, this influential, of course, will have a very loud majority of fans, and I tend to. It's hard sometimes for me to take a series on its own merits when there is such a large collection of people talking about it in ways that really do not sound appealing to me. And I've said this previously with all the other previous volumes that I've gotten of this. It does make me really sad that it took until Miura's death for me to actually properly give the series a try, on the fact that people were talking about it with a bit more nuance, which changed my perspective on the series, or at least gave me a reinvigorated push to give the series a shot. I think it also helps that with these deluxe editions, you are getting a larger chunk of story compared to the single volumes, and once you... I hate to say this because, like, I never want to be one of those people who's like, oh, once you get past, chapter XYZ, then it gets really good. But I think that the way that the story presents itself really clicks into place a little bit later. And for me, a lot of the aspects that really appeal to me with Berserk is not so much, yes, is the story of Guts and Casca and Griffith, but more is about the redemption, is about having that healing journey. I don't care about the big sword fights, is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of real narrative weight to them, and they're not important. But I don't read Berserk for the sword fights, or the monsters. I read it for the characters and all of the character dynamics and their journey of growth and change, which I'm sure a lot of people do, but a lot of the narrative prior to Miura's death was about, like, the big sword fights, and so that is my excuse. Of course... I really like this part of the story. Like, I like his journey with his ragtag group of people who have found kind of this weird little found family with Guts. I think it's very, very good, and I know some people have their favorite arcs and have different things that they really enjoy about this, but I just am happy with more character stuff. Less fight, more character stuff, which is not necessarily what a lot of people read Berserk for, at least within the most vocal members of fans. But yeah, and that's, again, I'm certainly not wholly unique in that. And I'm glad that I've given Berserk, an opportunity to really enjoy and engage with, and I'll continue to collect these large deluxe editions. Now, another series that I adore, but very different in tone compared to Berserk. This is another seinen though, another one with phenomenal artwork, and this is Kaoru A Bride Story, volume 13. Again, this, for people who have followed my channel for a while, this story or a series really needs no introduction. I feel like it's gotten a lot of popularity over the last couple of years, certainly over the pandemic, as have a lot of manga. But this is a collection of, it's a series about various couples within kind of the Silk Road area, a lot of the Middle East and kind of Central Asia. It's very fabulous. I love it. It's beautiful. Kaoru is fantastic at saying so much with really no words at all. It's gorgeous exploration of both the time period and the setting. Mori is fantastic at making a historically accurate period come to life with characters that may be removed by several hundred years from a modern audience, but is still so like relatable. She understands how to portray kind of the universal aspect of human emotions, and regardless of, again, what time period, what ethnicity, what religion, whatever, what social, expectations or cues there are, because this is the same for Emma, her other series, which is in a very different setting from A Bride Story. She still makes all of her characters' relationships, the romances, the friendships, the family dynamics, very, very true to life, because those are things that are just kind of innate within human nature. We as a species, we as humans have always had the propensity and the capacity for love, for jealousy, for disinterest, for passion, for whatever, right? And that comes across so well in Mori's work. If you haven't given her series a try, I highly recommend both this and Emma. I will say that A Bride Story is, in my opinion, her better work, with the caveat, of course, that for the main couple in the series, it is a historically appropriate relationship, wherein the relationship itself is kind of unconventional, wherein our main character is a young woman, 20 years old, recently married. She's 20, she is old for getting married, and her husband, who is much younger, who is 12, he's a little bit, young to be getting married, but much more age appropriate. And so it's always weird saying, like, they have a really respectful and interesting and well done relationship, and their dynamic is very, very good, even compared to some of the more similarly aged couples in the series, but without sounding like a creep. But like, alright guys, it was actually not that weird for 12-year-olds to get married. It's just history. Blame history. Don't blame me. Blame history. Anyway, A Bride Story is really good. Don't let that put you off. If you, honestly, if you're skipping over it because of that, you're missing out on one of the best, well-written romance series out there. And even if you're not, super into the main couple, all of the side couples, for the most part, are fantastic, and you should read it for them. Anyway, yeah, A Bride Story, fabulous. So happy with this most recent volume. Next, we have the second. I think this is going to be a 3-volume series, maybe 4. I don't remember. But this is Orochi by Kazuo Umezu. This is a classic horror series. It's pretty episodic, but it's about a girl who is called Orochi, and various horrific snake things happen. For those who don't know, Orochi is like a snake god, demon? Like, Orochi is an actual thing, right? Like in folklore and mythology. Anyway, really good. I love classic horror. Really nice to be getting horror in English versus just Junji Ito stuff. This is fantastic work. I really, really think that the creepiness, the way that the series or that Umez is able to really reflect some very horrific situations in a very effective way. It makes it very timeless. It's one that I think has stood the test of time. And if you are a fan of horror, especially classic horror manga, be sure to pick up these releases, because I like encouraging more horror manga licenses, just full stop, but also non-Ito horror manga licenses, which honestly we're seeing so much of, not necessarily from the big publishers, although it is really nice to see that Viz is putting some more money behind Umez books. But from Starfruit Books, they have a lot of really interesting horror manga coming up, and their Hideshi Hino catalog is really, really exciting. So yeah, it's a good time to be a classic horror fan, and be sure to support those series when they do get licensed, because they deserve it. For the large trim size ongoing manga, we have volume 9 of Witch Hat Atelier. This is by Kamama Shirahama. I honestly, both this and A Bride Story, I think came out quite a while ago, but because I was so busy catching up with other series, I just fell behind on these, and I was actually like quite mad at myself because of that. And now, since going through this process, I have since been able to get these and read them, and I love these books so much. But Witch Hat Atelier is fantastic. It's one that has steadily grown more and more popular, as it deserves to be, because it's just a phenomenal fantasy series with a wonderful magic system, a really clever and nuanced look at, the responsibility of magic and the challenging aspects of being part of a community that has the propensity for so much to help by so much, but also the propensity to hurt so much. I've seen like a lot of people recommend this series as an alternative to another large magic universe that shall remain nameless, one that many of people my age and older, and I'm sure to a certain extent younger, grew up with, to which I really agree. Namely because Shirahama, I don't think she's put anything into this series unintentionally. I think everything is done with real thought, and it addresses so many problems with the culture and the society of this, magic world that other fantasy settings either just don't want to challenge, don't want to think about, hand wave away, or is just inherently like, well, it's fine, or like, that's not a problem because magic fixes everything. Shirahama kind of comes face to face with a lot of society's problems that could be fixed with magic, but have pretty strict rules around for good reason, but also just kind of the ups and downs of human nature. Magic doesn't inherently make all things good, and we know that in every fantasy setting, but I think Shirahama really does drill down into what that means and how people can take advantage of a society that really does have the ability to, make whatever they want, do whatever they want, whilst also having a really intriguing political drama between various groups, And oh, it's just good. It's just really, really good. It's beautiful. Um, I highly, highly recommend you check it out if you haven't. It's one of my favorite series coming out, and that's really not me being like, not without hyperbole. It is genuinely one of the better series that I follow, and I follow a lot of really good series. If I do say so myself, but there's a reason this won an Eisner. There's a reason that this has gotten so popular over the last couple of years. I highly encourage everyone to try it if they haven't. I believe there's an anime coming up soon, so jump on it before it gets like super duper popular. That's not me being like, oh, I knew it before it was cool. But like, if you're wanting to buy the volumes, it's probably gonna be an easier time right now than once the anime is aired. I don't know, maybe that's just me projecting, but I've seen it happen a lot of times with a lot of other series, and considering the printing and paper shortages right now, yeah, if you're wanting to buy it, you know, or try it as well. Also, like, probably a lot of libraries would have this, so be sure to request it, if you are so inclined, because it is really, really good. It's really worth reading. Next, we have volumes 12 and 13 of Monthly Girls Nozakikun by Izumi Tsubaki. This is a 4-koma comedy about a teenage girl and her high school crush who is secretly a shoujo mangaka and who has based all of his series on, well, all of the characters from his hit series on like various kids at school. As said, it's a 4-koma series. It's very funny. It's very punchy. I don't dislike 4-koma series, but I think they have to be very strong to be very effective. I've said it before, I find comedy quite hit or miss sometimes when it comes to series, and I often don't reread them. I will say that I think, having read Tsubaki's other work, Ora-sama Teacher, which is also really good and very funny, that one is not a 4-koma, and this has a very similar sense of humor, but I do think that her humor works way better as a 4-koma style. Anyway, I'm just babbling. Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun is very, very funny. All of the characters are just a riot. They're all weirdos. You can't help but just really love them for who they are and root for all their various like weird relationships. Yeah, it's a great time. It's also shorter than Ora-sama Teacher. I don't know how much longer this one will run. That's not to say that I want it to end necessarily, but I don't know. Like, if you're wanting, because it is kind of a romantic comedy. If you're wanting romantic development, this isn't the series for you. It's a comedy. Like, it's a comedy with some romance that pokes fun at the tropes of shoujo manga, but it's not, you're not gonna get kind of the romantic satisfaction of even more typical romances like Ouran High School Host Club, which was also very heavy on comedy and certain aspects, or Ottoman, that's the one I'm trying to think of, like or like more classic romantic comedies. This one's very heavy on the comedy. It's also not a shoujo manga, despite being about shoujo manga. It is a shonen comedy, which also might, influence you one way or the other. But even, like, again, compared to like Horimiya, which is also a shonen rom-com, which is quite heavy on its humor, that has a lot more relationship development, especially for the main character. Like, Sakura, our main girl, she just has no hope with Nozaki. that boy has zero clue about romance despite selling or creating and selling one of the most popular shoujo manga of the era. It's a fun time. It's a fun time, but again, it's a comedy more than anything. So don't go into it expecting like a lot of relationship development. That's not to say that there's none. Especially with a lot of the side characters, but just yeah, it's not necessarily gonna be satisfying for your romantic wants and needs, cravings that you may have. So just go into it with that knowledge. Also watch the show because the anime is a very, very funny, good adaptation, and I think it also helps with kind of assessing the timing of the comedy if you're not used to For Coma. Rom-com, another one that I've really been enjoying. This one also recently ended in Japan at 9 volumes, so it's pretty short and sweet. For me, I think it's the perfect length for this type of series. And this is My Love Mix-Up by Aruko and Wataru Hinekure. This is the story of a teenage boy who, through some shenanigans, accidentally confesses to a boy in his class, in order to protect the girl that he likes. But then, he accidentally catches feelings. And so there's a lot of backwards and forwards with this, but it's a really sweet, young love, first love series about a guy who he didn't initially think he was bi, but he's definitely bi, especially for his one classmate. And now he's just kind of having his bisexual crisis and trying to figure himself out, whilst this guy that he has a big fat crush on is trying to figure out his own feelings, having never examined them at all, but also wanting to take seriously this confession that he's gotten. Meanwhile, of course, there's other relationships going on to the side that have their own ups and downs. It's very funny, very sweet, great reference. I think if you're wanting more bisexual representation, that isn't hand waved or laughed off or used as a joke or whatever, this is a good one. This is a great one. I really, it's very heartwarming and sweet, and I really like these kids. They're a good match, and every time there's a new volume, I read it, I laugh out loud because oh my god, Aruko. So I've said it before, but the characters are so expressive. Look how funny. Look, he's such a... So Aruko, for those who don't know, is the artist who worked on My Love Story. And the characters in this are just able to pull the funniest faces. There's so much great expressions. You'll be laughing uproariously, and then and then just also cry. Oh, it's super sweet. It warms your heart. It's also, pretty typical shoujo. Everyone's kind of that unrealistically hot. But in the way, again, Aruko isn't afraid to make these good looking characters, pretty characters, just pull the funniest faces, and it just makes it that much more real, because I don't know any teenager who's in a bit of just a fucking goofball and super dramatic, and definitely has pulled a couple wild faces, because life is very hard when you're 15 and you're struggling with your feelings over other people. I just think it's a really good time, and it's very funny and very sweet and heartwarming, and I'm really happy that we get this on a pretty regular basis as well. Can't wait for volume 5. Next we have a BL manga. Oh my goodness, it took forever for this series or this book to see the light of day, thanks to COVID and other various things. I think the publisher may have changed on the Japanese side with this, which meant that there was delays. I don't know. Anyway, it's in my hands now. I'm not going to complain. This is Canis Dear Hatter by Zach, Volume 1. This is a sequel to Canis Dear Mr. Rain, which is kind of it's the first volume. That one's a self-contained. This is a direct sequel with the same characters, just following them on their relationship. This couple, at least, is, and the first book and this book is very chaste. There's nothing explicit really going on at all. We have a kiss. We have a singular kiss in this volume. Although I know that the kind of second sequel, maybe it's more of a spin-off. I mean, it's a sequel, but maybe more of a spin-off, is very explicit, right? Which is many volumes away, so I don't know. It also ends on like a big drama cliffhanger. This one is more so focused on like the drama of the situation and these characters kind of learning more about each other, because their whole relationship, platonic relationship, started in like a very weird way. They're both people who are struggling with like their past and their potential and deciding on how to live their lives. And so they've got a lot of stuff going on that I don't necessarily think a relationship is the best. Like there is necessarily the best choice to be making, which is good because they're also not really making any decision about, relationships as of yet. But it's very good. I really like Zach's art style. I think it's really nice. I think the focus on kind of haberdashery and hat making, and again, like this, there's a focus on success and early success and how that frames your future, especially within the creative process. And I think there's a lot of really interesting aspects to this outside of just like, oh, there's potentially boys kissing in the series. I think it's just really engaging, and it's probably my favorite. This and the previous volume is probably my favorite release from Kuma Publishing. Just generally, some of their other titles have been very hit or miss with me, but this one I've enjoyed wholeheartedly. So next we have a fan comic. This is from a comics creator who I've shown off some of their work before, actually. But this is Sweet Puddin' Dreams by Psycho Inc., which is a Jeweler Richard fan comic, wherein for a lot of it, Richard is like a cat boy. He looks like a just a dude with cat ears, but in universe, I think is an actual cat. It's based off an old shoujo manga premise from Japan, obviously, that I don't think has ever been licensed, and I don't know how popular it is. But it also is kind of framed around some of the later events of latter novels for Jeweler Richard, a series which has gotten its novels licensed, and I'm very excited to look forward to and to be able to read. I'm very excited and looking forward to read. That's what I'm trying to say. This is really sweet. I enjoy Psycho Inc.'s works previously. I have their previous Jeweler Richard book. I have their a previous Yuri on Ice book. I also have their original comic, Open Spaces, Closed Places, which is also really good. Very evocative of classic shoujo manga, or very influenced by kind of 80s, 90s shoujo manga and early 2000s, of which, Psycho Inc. kind of grew up on. Yeah, if you're a fan of Julia Richard or Psycho Inc., check it out maybe. But it's a sweet little book. Of light novels, I have quite a few here. The first is the first volume of part 4 of the series. So this is Ascendance of the Bookworm, I'll Do Anything to Become a Librarian, Part 4, Founder of the Royal Academy's So-Called Library Committee, Volume 1, by Mia Kazuki. Another bookworm release from J-Novel. I'm still working through part 3. I'm not quite all the way through with that, but this is a phenomenal isekai story about a young woman who dies and is reincarnated into a world with no books, which is to her great dismay. And there's a lot going on in this series. Over the course of, we've been, magic's going on, royal structures, and Rose Mine has been really, oh my gosh, her character arc is going places. And one thing I will say about this series is that, what you expect to happen very rarely happens. It's very unpredictable, and that's a good thing. That's not a complaint. I will say, I've said previously, originality does not mean that something's inherently good. If something is inherently, never been done before, there's probably a reason. But I will say that this series very often doesn't, if you're expecting the same cliches of the setting of isekai, then you're gonna be surprised, because there's so many times where I'm like, okay, this is gonna happen, and then that absolutely does not happen. The whole series is turned on its head, and it's a good thing. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this particular part of the series, although I will need to finish the previous part of the series before I get to this one. And that, I think, is a good sign that I've spoken too much about this already. On to the next. We have the second volume of this series from Yen on It's My Happy Marriage by Akumi Agitogi. This is the story of a young woman who is betrothed to this guy, who's the captain, the leader of this anti-monster unit. It's set in kind of early, kind of turn of the century Japan. There's a lot of talk of westernization and Japan going through this transitional period, but there's also a fantasy element wherein they're called grotesques, or grotesque, within the story, but are basically kind of like yokai. And various families have kind of magical powers which allow them to fight these monsters, and so her fiance is leader of one of these military or governmentally run units, safety or whatever. She herself didn't think she had her own kind of power, and was very horribly abused by her family, or her father and his stepmother, or her stepmother and stepsister, or half-sister. She's always been very, horrifically abused over the course of her family life after the death of her mother. And So she kind of jumped at the chance to, when she got engaged to this guy, despite hearing all these rumors that, he'd had all of these previous fiancés but never worked out. They always left within 3 days. She is like, no, I need to escape this situation. I don't want to bring shame upon my family, and I also don't want to cause trouble for him. And like, any situation is better than the situation I'm in right now. Which is like, I mean, people have gotten married for less. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a good thing, but it's an understandable thing. And over the course of the first volume, she slowly kind of starts to come out of her shell. Their relationship, it's very, very, very slowly starts to change. He definitely starts to fall for her. And they come to like a pretty solid understanding of each other. And this is not just a marriage of convenience anymore. It also is the kind of growth period for our main character to become more confident in herself after, years and years of this abuse. She also confronts her family to kind of shocking events. I liked the first volume a lot. I did have issues with kind of a little bit of repetitiveness, or stagnancy, maybe is the better word. It's a hard book to read because of the self-deprecation of the main character, which is understandable. Again, she has a lot of very negative self-talk because of her upbringing, and she has a very, very low self-worth, which again slowly changes, but she certainly doesn't value herself even in this second book. She's getting there, but she's certainly got a long way to go, and that's like, I'm not trying to minimize a victim of abuses, like how they have dealt with with how their mental capacity is and their look at their self after years of abuse. That's not what I'm saying. It's just kind of a little bit, I've read other light novel series about characters with very low self-worth that were were easier to get through, and were much longer than these volumes. That being said, I do really like the setting. I think their relationship of the main couple is very strong, and again, it's really nice to see the growth of the main character over the course of the series. I think their dynamic is very sweet, although they definitely have communication issues, something that really comes to a head in this volume, and hopefully in the next one we'll see that it really changes. I'm on the fence as to whether I will continue the series physically. I'm happy to continue reading it, but I think it's one that I might not revisit just because, well, I think if I'm humming and hawing about it, I think I will just continue it digitally. It's not one that necessarily has had the strongest start for me, although I do really like almost every aspect of it, and I do think it continues to get better. I'm looking forward to the anime adaptation that we will be getting for this very soon. And I just really like the setting. I think it's very well executed. I might give it another volume 3, to really cement itself and see how I feel after that one, before finding a new home for these first 2 volumes. But ultimately I will continue with it. I just I'll continue digitally. Oh, look at my indecisiveness. It's not bad. I really liked a lot of this. I think this one was also a step up from the previous one. It forced our characters to actually freaking communicate, which is nice. And I think that is what's making me a little bit hesitant, because I do think that there's a lot of potential. But of course, I've been burnt before with how relationships in a lot of this type of media develop. It's one step forwards and three steps back very often. Anyway, yeah, My Happy Marriage is very good. I think it's one worth checking out. The manga was recently licensed. There's an anime coming out. Definitely do check it out if it sounds like your thing. And I do think that there's a lot of potential, and it's very popular as well. So I think that's at least worth giving it a try if it sounds like your thing. We have a Cross Infinite Worlds release. Another one that is, like, they offer print editions. There's a print on demand service that they offer through Amazon or through whomever is they're doing it. I've said this before, they're not the most like flash publisher. They're a very small boutique publisher, but I'm not going to give them crap for their books being very much a print on demand release. But if you're expecting a release similar to, Yen On or Seven Seas, or hell, even Viz's light novels, then it doesn't necessarily have the polish compared to those from a more traditional publisher. That being said, I haven't read this one, although I've been anticipating it ever since it was announced. This is exactly my shit. I don't really know a huge amount about this, but as soon as I saw the cover, as soon as I heard the premise, I was like, yep, I am reading that. This belongs to me. That's Onmyoji and Tengu Eyes, the Spirit Hunters of Tomoe. This is volume 1 by Yoshiko Utamine. We'll read the back, shall we? A supernatural mismatch made in heaven. Paranormal incidents heat up when two mysterious men cross paths in Tomoe, a small town in Hiroshima with a long history of supernatural encounters. Misato Miyazawa is a strikingly beautiful young man with a troubled past. Born to a distinguished family of onmyoji, specialists in divination, Misato is no stranger to the occult. That's why he jumps at the chance to join the Abnormal Disaster Unit in Tomoe's Town Hall Crisis Management Division, a unit more commonly known as the Spirit Hunters. Enter Ryoji Karino, a fiery, handsome man with peculiar green and silver eyes. Working as a freelance monk and raised by a man claiming to be a Tengu, Ryoji is by no means an average citizen. When he finds Misato in a sticky situation, he kindly steps in, and the mismatched pair end up living together. What dark mysteries will unravel before them as they attempt to confront paranormal happenings under the constraints of government rules? Oh my... Guys, this is exactly my shit. It's like they wrote this for me. The other series that I have from Cross Infinite World is similar. It's actually very similar to My Happy Marriage, kind of. Historical Japan fantasy setting, kind of low fantasy setting. I have a type, we know that I have certain genres that I enjoy, but I'm being extremely blatant here and obvious. So I look forward to this. I've had hits and misses with Cross Infinite Worlds books before. They are typically, and like a lot of light novels, like start as web novels and sometimes make the transition to like print in Japan. So may or may not have gone through some rigorous editing. Sometimes it just feels like published fan fiction, which is not a knock on fan fiction, but sometimes it just doesn't feel like it. Like, it could have certainly done with an edit to really hone in on some of the certain peculiarities of self-published works. Again, I haven't read this, but man oh man, if that premise didn't scream Simply G to you, then you must be new to the channel. Thanks for sticking around this long. um, yeah, I am very, very keen on reading this. I have to wrap up my current novel, but once I do, this is what I'm getting into. Finally, we have a Danmai, which is one that I read kind of immediately as soon as I got it because I love this series, and that is Heaven Official's Blessing Volume 3 by Mo Xiang Tongjiu. Again, I am so sorry at my pronunciation. I'm really bad. But this is more commonly known within Danmai communities as Tiangguang Sifu. Heaven Official's Blessing. This is probably MXTX's probably her most popular work. I want to say Modao Zushi, or the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, is probably her most popular work. But this is a very close second. It's the most polished of her works, being the newest and the longest. But oh my god. So I, like a lot of people, I'm sure, discovered MXTX's works through the various adaptations of her novels. Again, her works started as self-published novels, Chinese novels, web novels. Starting with Scum Villain's Self-Saving System, and then Demonic Cultivation was her second, and this one, Heaven Official's Blessing, is her third. I don't know if she has plans for another novel, who knows. Anyway, doesn't matter. I first learned of her work thanks to the animated adaptation of Modao Zushi. I think all 3 seasons are now on YouTube. You can watch them for free with English subtitles. They're also on WeTV for Modao Zushi, at least. The animated adaptation of this series is on, was on Funimation. I'm sure it's on Crunchyroll. It's also on Netflix in a lot of regions. You can watch it a lot of places. And then the Scum Villain animated adaptation is on WeTV. That one's a CGI animation versus like more traditional cartoon look, compared to which Heaven Official's Blessing and Modao Zushi are, which I think definitely gave it a little bit more appeal for like anime and BL and yaoi fans who may have discovered Danmai over the pandemic. Also, Modao Zushi has a very popular live action adaptation called The Untamed, which is also on Netflix. So like some people found her stuff through The Untamed, some people found it through the animated adaptations. Some people started with the like fan translations of the novels. There's also comic adaptations of the 2 more popular works, at least. Very, 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 very popular stuff. I, like a lot of people, probably found them through the animated versions. But in saying that, only Modao Zushi, or Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, has a complete quote-unquote adaptation. It's very censored because China doesn't like gay people, but the storylines have all been adapted. Heaven Official's Blessing does have that animated version. It only has 1 season, which only adapts the first book, or at least the first English book. So volume 2 and 3 were like completely new material, and I knew like all of Danmai in general is pretty tragic. Like it can be very confronting. Almost like every Danmai I've read has some sort of like genocide, horrific murder, like just some sort of violence or tragedy, or there's always bad shit going on. And man, oh man, does this particular volume of Heaven Official's Blessing crank up the bad shit. This particular volume kind of closes out the second storyline, which is a flashback kind of. It's one of the characters when he was younger before he ascended to godhood. So his life, and then following and kind of the tribulations as a young ascended god, and how he fell from grace, basically. And man, that was tough to read because, oh boy, yeah, political conflict can be fucking rough, dude. But insane again, really good, but like, oh my god, so many people die. So many people die, and there's like really visceral descriptions of some pretty gory scenes and violence. So just beware. And then after that, like, it finishes that story arc off, and then it presents its new story line. And man, oh my gosh, there was a lot going on there. In saying that, again, none of these are complaints. I love it. I love when a story can do these kinds of things really well, and I think this story does it really well. I'm really interested to see, because I don't know, like, this is my first time experiencing these parts of the story, so I'm always really curious to see how, like, what's gonna happen next. It's all a surprise. Like, not everything's a surprise because of the way that fandom is. You're gonna get spoiled with anything, even if you're not searching for anything. But man, oh man, Heaven Official's Blessing is really good. I also recommend the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. I never remember what that they've decided to call that one in English. And I doubly recommend Scum Villain Self-Saving System, because that's the black sheep of the three, and it needs more love, and that one's really freaking funny. But man, if you're wanting drama and you aren't put off by violence, then Heaven Official's Blessing, check it out. And also, it's kind of the most, I don't know, there's something about, like, I have been in love with you for 800 years. I've been not only in love with you, but, like, wholly dedicated to you for 800 years. It's like each time in MXTX's works, like, the couple, like, ramps up in their devotion, which is, like, it's really wish fulfilling, but also like, oh god, like this, ugh, dang it. You think that the relationship of, like, MXTX, of that dedication over 13 or 16 years, depending on whatever version you're watching, plus however many the 10 other years, it's like, oh my gosh, that's true love. And then you get to this one, it's like 800 years, bitches. And you're like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's just kind of really weird, wish fulfilling in that way, but really good. Everything that I got for July, not actually a huge amount, but I'm sure I spoke way too much about everything. And as I said, I'm going through a big overhaul, downsizing of my collection currently. So even in this background, you can see that there's such a mess. And things are missing and have been shuffled around, and I've really, like, I've downsized a lot. So yeah, let me know your thoughts and feelings on any of the series that I spoke about today. Have you tried any of these series? Do you agree or disagree with anything that I've spoken about? Is there anything new that you're reading that you think is worth recommending? I love to hear it all. Otherwise, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye till then.